King Solomon was quite a fellow. He was the richest, wisest man who ever lived. He wrote a lot of wise things. He had a very unique meeting with God. He built the temple. David planned it, Solomon built it. Tells us when the temple was dedicated, the presence of the Lord came. It was so strong that the priest couldn't even minister. So how did it happen? What happened to him? God told him not to multiply horses or women to himself. Between wives and concubines, he had over 900 women whose lives belonged to him. He had 900 women. This is not normal. And forget about the dehumanization of those women, that they had no life except to wait, that maybe once, twice in their lives, he would call them. But that's not the worst of it. If you walk out on the Temple Mount and you look to the east, there's a valley, and then there's a hill. It's not a kilometer away. And on that hill today, there sits the Mazon d'Avraham. I think it's a Jesuit place of prayer and housing, lodging. On that hill, Solomon set up altars, sacrificing to the gods of his foreign wives. Among them was the god of Moloch. Imagine this. The worshipers are coming out of the temple, having been bringing their sacrifice, they're offering their praise to the living God of Israel. And they walk out and they look straight across at the hill to the east, and they see smoke. The smoke of the flesh of burning children coming off of the altars that Solomon had established. What kind of darkness is that? How did that happen? We read in 1 Kings chapter 3 that the people were continuing to sacrifice at the high places, it says in verse 2, because there's no house built for the name of the Lord until those days. At that time, the tabernacle that Moses had built in the wilderness was still there. And Solomon, it says in verse 4, went to Gibeon to sacrifice at that altar. Now, also at that time, the ark of the Lord, the representation of God's presence, was in the tabernacle that David had established. Solomon went to the tabernacle of Moses. The ark of the Lord was not there. He knew that. He went. The ark of the Lord was in the tent of David. So Solomon went to where the people went. And then it says, that the Lord appeared to Solomon in a dream. But before that, in verse 3, it says Solomon loved the Lord. What a statement. What do you think when you hear someone talking about another person, describing them to you, and they say they love the Lord? Now, I've heard that so many times, and it's like, the beginning and the end. What else do you need to say? When you say they love the Lord, that's everything. But this phrase goes on. It says Solomon loved the Lord, walking in the statutes of his father David, except that he sacrificed and burned incense at the high places. It makes me think of Yeshua speaking to the church in Revelation and says, you've done all these really, really good things, but this one thing I have against you, you left your first love. Everything that could be said about Solomon, he loved the Lord, he walked in David's statutes, but this one thing, he continued to worship idols. He said, oh Lord, I love you, but I also love all of this too. God's a jealous God. That doesn't fly very well, does it? So now, in that place, under that condition, with that hard attitude, the Lord appears to Solomon. Solomon's making an offering in a place where the presence of the Lord is actually not. And Solomon asks the Lord to give him an understanding heart to judge your people, And we skip down and we see what the Lord says after that. And he says, yeah, Solomon, I'm going to give you this. And then I'm going to give you all this other stuff too, because you didn't ask for something for yourself. Riches for yourself, or the life of your enemies, or anything like that. And when we read that, we think, well, that was fine, really. But then let's go back. Where did Solomon go wrong? Something happened where he missed a turn, and he ended up in a pit, deeper, having fallen further probably than any man ever. And look at what he says. Therefore, give your servant an understanding heart to judge your people. He said, I would like you to give me a gift so I can judge your people. Now, when God asked, he didn't actually ask David, but David says what he wanted, and God asked him, it's what he would have said. What does David say? There's only one thing I want, and there's only one thing I will seek after. I want to dwell in your house. I want to behold your glory and your presence, and in the time of trouble, you'll lift me up. And David's attitude was, God, I want to be in your house. I want to care for you, take care of you, and be concerned with you, and all this other stuff, you'll take care of it. Solomon is saying, you give me so I can do. David is saying, I want to be with you, and then you can do. David's asking for the presence. Solomon's asking for a gift. Solomon's asking for an ability. David's asking for the Lord. But now look at this. 1 Kings 3, verse 9. Therefore give to your servant an understanding heart to judge your people, that I may discern between good and evil. He is asking for the knowledge of good and evil. That was kind of the beginning of this whole thing, isn't it? This is the very thing he's seeking. It's the thing that took us out of the garden. Beloved, these are subtle things. We have a love for the Lord. But what else do we love? What is the heart of David? Right? Consider David, a very imperfect man. But the position that God has placed him in. Now, I'm speaking of this in contrast to Solomon. Yeshua, the Creator, eternal Son of God, is called by the name Son of David. David is the Son of God. It's the other way around. And Yeshua says he holds the key of David. A little bit of a side note. Have you ever heard somebody said, maybe you've said it, I take the key of David and I open and shut? When did God ever give the key of David to anyone? Yeshua says he holds the key of David. Now you would think it would have been that David, the created being, would hold the key of God, of Yeshua, but it's the other way around. Yeshua says he holds the key of David. So that says to us, there is something in David's life that's the key to life. That's the key to God's heart. He was a man after God's heart. Solomon was after the people. He went to the place where the people went. He asked God for a gift so he could relate to the people. And look at where it took him. So when God gave him all that he gave him, the wisdom and riches, he gave him something that he couldn't handle. And those wisdom and riches took him into the deepest hole probably that any human being had ever gone into, to the point where he builds the temple and is burning children to sacrifice to foreign gods. But he loved the Lord. Fairly sobering. So where are we? Are we looking for a gift? Are we looking for power? Are we looking for an ability? Are we looking to know? Are we looking to understand? Or is the passion and desire of our heart to bless our Father and to be with him, to behold his face all the days of our life?